The Mass Effect Legendary Edition has been out now for 2 weeks, and I can finally talk about it because last night, or by the time you see this video 2 nights ago, I finally finished Mass Effect 3. Ever since I started playing Legendary Edition, I knew I was going to make a video on it because I very quickly began to realize just how amazing these games were and how I'd missed out on them all my life. Well, maybe not all of my life. I probably didn't need to play as Commander Shepard at 1 year old, but you get the point. The Mass Effect Legendary Edition launched 2 weeks ago, bundling together the first 3 Mass Effect games, forming the trilogy of stories around Commander Shepard as a full remaster, overhauling a lot of key features from some of the earlier games and also reintegrating things to allow character progression to work better and just generally have a better feel and look to it. And it was a perfect point for me to jump in. I saw the trailer for it, I watched the trailer again, I watched the trailer again, I watched the trailer again, literally watched it about 20 times. There was something about a trailer that just enamored me and eventually went, right, stop looking at the trailer, pre-order the game, let's play it. And so in this video, I'm going to discuss my thoughts on Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, all the bits in between, the things I liked across all the games, things I didn't like in certain games, and of course, I'll spend some time talking about Mass Effect 3's ending. You might not like what I have to say about it, but I'm still going to talk about it. So let's start off by talking about Mass Effect 1, a game that has a very, very good story, and it's the reason I got so hooked immediately with the games. I mean, if this first game hadn't been very good, I might have just packed it in altogether to begin with. But it sets up the whole world the games are set in very well. It allows you to build up this story and get used to the characters that you're working with, because there are a lot of different characters, a lot of different species, a lot of different locations. It's not an easy thing to juggle for a brand new franchise when you're trying to put across this story in a game, keep people interested, and also make it worthwhile playing. The game as itself feels a bit more simple and by the numbers because of that, because they're spending more time in setting up the world, but that does not mean the story isn't good, because hunting down Saren, fighting the Geth, investigating the myth of the Reapers and the Protheans, all really interesting stuff, really enjoyed it. The characters are all really well written, in particular Commander Shepard. I played as a female Commander Shepard, or Femme Shep as you want to call her. I had a couple of reasons for that. First off, I just like playing as female characters in games. There's no real particular reason for it, I just always tend to play as them in Skyrim, Fallout, games like that. But there was a bit more of a reason in Mass Effect Legendary Edition, and that's because if you've seen the Mass Effect gamer poops, I don't need to explain it anymore, you know why. While they are funny videos, it means you can't really take the male Commander Shepard as easily when all you've heard him say for the last 5 to 10 years is,
"Report to the ship as soon as possible. We're being okay?"
But Jennifer Hale's performance as Commander Shepard is fantastic, and the voice acting across the board really from every character, most if not all characters, are voice acted phenomenally. Squad mates like Rex, Liara, Garrus, Joker, all these people that are interacting with you and living around you and responding to the choices you make, they're all very interesting characters. None of them feel particularly bland or two-dimensional. They all have their own unique personalities, their own desires, they react in certain ways to the things that you do. It's very well designed. With it being the first game in the franchise though, there were a few teething issues I did have with it personally. I wasn't really a big fan of the combat system. It didn't really get a great deal better across the other games. In my own personal opinion, the combat is the worst part of the Mass Effect games. I don't think it's bad. Don't mistake me for saying that it's a bad thing, but I just think it's very bland and by the numbers. There's not really anything unique to it. There's nothing that makes it stand out compared to any other shooter game, but that isn't why I played Mass Effect anyways. I'll get into later when I talk about romance in particular. The dialogue and the character interactions are what make Mass Effect the game that it is, in my opinion. So while the combat and the cover system isn't great, it didn't bother me because that wasn't why I was there anyway. But I will admit the Mako sections exploring the worlds on a rover were just not very fun. It's not like I didn't enjoy them per se, but it was just kind of like, yeah, this is just something to do to get me to the next bit. I'm not really taking this in too much. You know, things did look a bit better because it was a remastered version, but it gets a bit boring after a while. And it's one of the reasons I wasn't exactly rushing to do side missions in Mass Effect 1 in particular, because I knew a lot of them were going to be Mako based, and I wasn't really up for that, I'll be honest with you. But in leaving a lot of the side missions accidentally, I realized afterwards that I had made a bit of a mistake, because once you finish the final section of the campaign in the Citadel fighting Saren, which that whole section, fantastic, beautiful, you can't actually, after that's finished, go back and do the side missions. Once you finish that, the game ends. If you try to load it back up again, it throws you right back into the middle of the boss fight with Saren. So if you want to do the side missions in Mass Effect 1, you've got to do them before the final section of the game. I didn't know that going in, but to be fair, that's not really a big downside, because it just gives me another reason to play the game, so I can't really complain there. But overall, as a game, I only spent about 2 to 3 days on Mass Effect 1 compared to nearly a week for 2 and 3, but it's a fantastic game that really got me hooked on the franchise and very excited to advance into the next games. But little did I know that it would pale in comparison to what came next. Let's talk now about Mass Effect 2. When you enter the sequel of a game franchise, you've already set up the world and the characters. Of course, you add new destinations and new people in, but the main world building you needed is all handled in the first game, so it gives you a chance to really experiment with what you're working in, make some really interesting stories, and go in interesting directions with the characters you both know and haven't met yet. And the whole story of assembling together this big crack team to fight against the Collectors, all hired by the Elusive Man and Cerberus, is fantastic. The game's opening opening is one of the best openings in any game ever. I will say that with complete confidence. Watching the whole Normandy break apart and trying to rescue as many of the crew members as you can, to seeing Shepard actually die. Genuinely, as Shepard was drifting towards the planet dying, I had the Skyfall theme playing in my head. It was like a James Bond opening. It was so action-packed and fantastically done that it wouldn't have been out of place if Adele had started singing in the background. It genuinely wouldn't have done. The Elusive Man as a character is a very interesting figure. He plays this kind of overarching role in Mass Effect 2 who is helping you, but also you're not really sure what his intentions are. I guess the clue is in the name. He was a very elusive character, and I thought he was very well written and a very compelling character. One of the things I really liked about this game in particular, though, was the emphasis on loyalty and the amount of squad mates you had, because Mass Effect 1 had a decent squad. There were several members you could interact with, but Mass Effect 2 about doubled the squad size, if not more. I know some of them are DLC, but in the Legendary Edition, you can't really count them as DLC in the same way because they're all just part of the game at base. But so many of the missions are so much fun, it's worth spending the time in them and enjoying the worlds that each of the characters put you in, whether it's a heist with Kasumi, whether it's getting revenge with Zaid, whether it's curing a plague for Mordin. There's all sorts of different stories and plot threads and everything in this game that are just so well done. And what really does it for me was the final suicide mission. Now, I will explore this in a bit more detail when I get to choices, because I feel like that's a better place to talk about this, but the final mission, the build up to it and the way it was done, really, really good. The Collectors as villains weren't quite as interesting to me compared to the Geth and Sovereign and Saren, me personally, but the way the whole story was done, the way you were building up this existential dread that this mission you were going on through this Omega-4 relay, you weren't going to come back out of. The chances were you were on a one-way trip. Personally, I saved everyone apart from Legion, which makes me really sad because I did every loyalty mission. I thought I'd followed everything to the book. I had every upgrade and everything else working, so something caused Legion to die. As for things I didn't like so much about Mass Effect 2, there were only a couple of things really. First off, I want to point out the Citadel, because in Mass Effect 1, the Citadel was fantastic. It was this huge, sprawling area you could walk across for miles. It was a bit confusing to get used to at first. There was quite a large map layout and it wasn't very easy to learn, but once you knew your way around, it was a really big area you could enjoy and explore. And the Citadel in Mass Effect 2 just kind of ruins that. It just feels like a multi-floor shopping mall. It doesn't really feel like a big sprawling metropolis anymore, which kind of sucks because it did look very nice visually. I just don't think it really lived up to the Citadel of Mass Effect 1. And the only other thing that I wasn't as keen on was the way certain squad members from Mass Effect 1 were treated going into Mass Effect 2. It felt very much to me as if a lot of them were just kind of sidelined. I know characters like Rex and Ashley might not have survived by the end of Mass Effect 1, so you've got to be careful how much you integrate them into the story. I get that, but seeing them all get sidelined at the cost of new characters, it's not a massive problem because the new characters they introduce are fantastic, don't get me wrong. People like Mordin, Miranda, Jack, Kasumi, really cool characters and really make up for the lack of some of the key Mass Effect 1 characters. But I would have liked to have seen things combine over replace, if that makes sense. I would have liked to have seen the Mass Effect 1 squad members react and respond to people being added, rather than have their places being taken for the most part. I get it logically in terms of the lore, you know, Shepard had been dead for 2 years, people had moved on and done their own things, and it made sense for the sake of the plot, but I wish they hadn't been sidelined so much. The one that hurt me the most, though, was Liara, because I haven't mentioned it yet, but Liara is my favourite character. I would do anything for that girl in those games. I absolutely loved the relationship I was building between Shepard and her. I loved their romance and everything about it, and because of that, as you probably see coming, Liara not being a main squad member or a main romance option during Mass Effect 2, I wasn't a big fan of. The only clinch in the armor that makes up for this, though, is that the Shadow Broker DLC that she's part of in Mass Effect 2 is absolutely phenomenal. It makes up for all of the lack of Liara in Mass Effect 2. You spend a great deal of time with her, but also give us that sweet, sweet Shepard and Liara romance we were missing in the rest of the game. I was also surprised to see the way that Liara had changed that DLC, but they developed her character in a way that was interesting, made her more than just this scholar that wants to know more about the Protheans, added some more layers to her, and I can't argue with that. She's a great character, and she just got made better. And so with all that said and done, can you really top Mass Effect 2? Well, I'm going to try. I'm going to do something a bit different with Mass Effect 3. I'm going to work backwards this time. And the first thing I've got to say with Mass Effect 3 is thank goodness we got unlimited sprint. It was so irritating in the first 2 games for Shepard to run like 10 meters and then just stop to catch her breath, looking like she'd just been running after an ice cream truck. It was just really weird, and in Mass Effect 3 they fixed that. You know, you can leap across gaps, climb ladders, run for an unlimited period of time. She actually had mobility that she'd solely needed in the first 2 games. That already was a huge plus. The game did have less squad mates though, and again, in a similar way to Mass Effect 2, it sidelined a lot of key characters we got used to. I understand DLC characters like Zaid or Kasumi getting sidelined because they were DLC characters in Mass Effect 2, you know, they weren't part of the main story technically, but you've got characters like Jacob and Miranda and Jack and Kelly Chambers who only really have supporting character roles who, again, like the ones in Mass Effect 1 that came back in Mass Effect 2, should have had more time to play around with. I should be grateful we got to see the characters at all, but it did suck to see we didn't get to see them as much as we possibly could have done, or in my case, none for Jack. Jack is like one of my favourite characters behind Liara, and I accidentally didn't do the Grissom Academy mission, fully intended to, didn't realise it would expire as quickly as it did, and thought nothing of it, thought thought, okay, fine. I wonder where Jack is. I very quickly realized where Jack was when in the final section I had to kill her in a very unceremonious piece of dialogue. Seriously, I mean, if you hadn't listened to the datapad and figured out that Jack had been experimented on, you would have just killed one of the Nemesis characters and just gone, oh, that was Jack? Really? That's it? Move on? What? Like, literally, it's just a line from Edie to say, oh, Jack's dead, move on. It was very, very badly handled. I just really wish I'd saved her in Grissom Academy, though. That would have just erased the whole problem. Anyway, let's move on. The sudden shift from Cerberus being the kind of questionable ally to complete certain dead to rights enemy was a bit jarring for me. Probably because I don't remember Cerberus even being name-dropped in Mass Effect 1, so when they were saying in Mass Effect 2 that Shepard shouldn't trust Cerberus, blah, 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 it probably was because I hadn't picked up on Mass Effect 1 who Cerberus was. Again, didn't spend as much time in that game as I could or should have done, and we'll fix that, don't worry. But you know, I got over it, and very quickly they immediately pointed out Cerberus to be the bad guys, painted them in that light, and I got over it. But my days, did one other person not manage that. I'm sorry, but Ashley was just a weird anomaly in Mass Effect 3 to me. It was kind of like she just turned into a bit of a pest in this game. For one thing, she does not deserve to be a Spectre. I don't know what the hell the game was thinking in making her a Spectre. She's just a lieutenant commander who backed up the human Spectre, but she just constantly whined about Cerberus, and for the first hour or two of the game, at every turn it's Shepard, you with Cerberus. Shepard, you with Cerberus. How do I trust you? How do I trust you? I'm like, I couldn't care less if you didn't trust me. I've told you I'm not with them. Suck it up or walk away. You know how I said Liara had changed a lot going from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2? That was an interesting change. Ashley didn't even feel like the same character. Genuinely, if I had known how she'd be in Mass Effect 3 when I was playing Mass Effect 1, I'd have saved Alenko. I wouldn't have hesitated. It got to the point where I genuinely considered letting one of my squad mates or myself just shoot her in the face off with Udina. I wasn't enjoying her character at all, and it makes me sad because I liked her in the first game. So yeah, honestly, as much as I wanted to like Ashley, the way she behaved, she just kind of turned into a bit of a bitch. But let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about the story. So if the Saren arc was good and the Collector's arc was great, the Reaper War arc was the top tier thing. It was amazing. Easily in terms of story content, it was the best arc of the 3 games, getting to visit all these different homeworlds and moons, see every single species react in different ways to the current war and fighting the Reapers, and actually trying to unite the species together in a way that you just couldn't have done in the other 2 games. It was so well done, and the way they constantly made point of it towards the end as well, that Shepard was the only person that could have united these species. It was really fun to go on that journey and see all of these pieces come together. And it's clear it had an impact on me because the game made me cry at 4 different intervals. We do love when a game gets you upset. I chose to stream Mass Effect 3 on my Twitch at one point because I wasn't sure what game to stream in an evening, and I streamed the death of Mordin and Thane in quick succession. Apparently I picked the wrong time to stream the Legendary Edition, but it's mainly a compliment to the game because you clearly have got so attached to these characters and seeing them all interact and evolve with Shepard over the games that when they do die, it's sad. It's really sad. Mordin's death in particular was just, it was the point where I was kind of like, oh, we're really gonna have people sacrificing themselves now, and that just completely broke me. And I think it's also because it was building upon the previous 2 games and bringing everything to a head in such a brilliant way, because you really got to see the impacts of your choices begin to play out to show you how different characters now respond differently because of things you've done in the past. Whether you played your Shepard as a Paragon or a Renegade, I was mainly a Renegade. I tended to go more for, you know, backing up my crewmates. That was the only really Paragon stuff that I did. Everything else, if Shepard had to throw someone out of a window, she'd just do it. I didn't really care. Found it quite funny, to be honest. Being a badass character was very enjoyable. But you probably sat there thinking, well, Troy, you said you cried 4 times at Mass Effect 3, but you only mentioned 2 names. What were the other 2? Well, one of them was Grunt, because I genuinely thought Grunt was about to go out like a champ defending us against the Rachni, only for him to walk out of the cave completely fine. I was crying my eyes out and then shouted at the TV when I realized that Grunt had actually survived. I was like, you can't do this to me. You can't play with my emotions like this. And the final time I cried, we'll get to that in a little bit. So let's talk about a few of the things that are on my mind before we get to the Mass Effect 3 ending, because that's a good point to kind of wrap it off before we look at the future of Mass Effect. So for me, first off, DLCs. I don't really know exactly all the DLCs in the game. It said there were over 41s, and I never played the original game, so I don't know what's DLC and what's not for the most part. But the 3 DLCs that stand out to me the most are Omega, Citadel, and Lair of the Shadow Broker. I know Arrival's a big one, but I think I missed that out in Mass Effect 2. I haven't played it yet, so I'll get to that soon. But Citadel was amazing for the humor, the character relations, and just spending more time with people during Mass Effect 3. Omega was really good because I like Aria Taloka as a character. I thought she was a very cool character, and I was a big fan of Omega. So getting to explore that whole area again was very cool, and getting to participate in this war and also have the war assets help with Mass Effect 3's final ending, really good. And I've already mentioned a lot about Lair the Shadow Broker, you know, seeing Liara evolve, getting the romance that we wanted so badly in the main game for Mass Effect 2, at least the romance that I wanted so badly. So yeah, the DLC expansions I think are some of the best in any game really. I think in terms of DLC as far as it goes for a lot of games, Mass Effect managed to pull it off in a way that added a lot to the story and kind of made you feel like you couldn't play the game without it, and that's a huge compliment to a DLC. But there are 2 key things I want to talk about before we get onto the Mass Effect 3 ending. Choices and romance. Now, choices are a very pivotal part of this game, whether it's something simple like playing Shepard as a renegade or a paragon, or whether it's which crew members live or die. It's very clear to me that Shepard is at the heart of a lot of the events in this game, and a lot of them are either directly or indirectly influenced by the things that she does in the game. But I think it was the face-off with Rex on Vermeer where I really began to clock just how many choices I was going to get, and just how important they might be. I think the way in which the choices blend into the characters' relationships with each other and how the rest of the game transpires is really phenomenal. As I mentioned earlier, the suicide mission is the best example of this because the entire ending of Mass Effect 2 is based on the choices you make during the game. Who do you spend time with to make loyal to you? Which upgrades for the ship do you buy? Which squad mates do you bring for which objectives? Every single thing you do, either indirectly or directly, influences whether people live or die during those missions. If you don't get a certain armor upgrade for the Normandy, Jack's dead. Nothing you can do about it. It's a really rare thing to see in games where choices have this much of an impact, and it was done fantastically. I really, really think so. But I think for me, the biggest choice was the choice between the Geth and the Quarians in Mass Effect 3, because I didn't quite realize how final that would be. When Legion came back as this kind of hologram VI type unit and said that the Geth deserved free will and independence, I completely backed it, you know? And I genuinely had faith that the Quarians would use their brain cells to stop firing on the Geth once we told them they'd gone independent and weren't going to fight. So I uploaded the code to Legion, and I watched the Quarian fleet get decimated before Tali threw herself backwards off a cliff. I think it'll be a long time before I play a game like Mass Effect again where the choices have that much of an impact. I really do think so. I know there was one place people wish they'd have more impact, and yes, I know, we're teething on it a lot, but we'll get there shortly. Because one last thing, as I said, I wanted to talk about was romance. As I said earlier in the video, I kind of throw away combat in Mass Effect. I don't really look at it as much. My most important thing in these games is the relationships between characters. And for the most part, the way romance is done in this game, where it follows on naturally with little bits of flirting in between missions, building up this spark and making it into something proper, is really, really well done. Issues arise, however, when you basically have to do it all over again to rekindle relationships in future games. I get in a way where they didn't just carry on. As I said earlier, you know, there are time jumps between the games. Shepard's dead for 2 years at one point and is grounded for another year, so it makes sense logically why things wouldn't just pick up immediately where they left off. But for me, it just kind of felt a bit rigid when in Mass Effect 3, after seeing Liara on Mars, and after having had a romantic relationship with her twice before by this point, we had a conversation on the Normandy, said about our feelings, and I thought we were back together. But it turns out that we weren't, and I had to wait until much later in the game in a conversation on the Citadel where I have to say to Liara that I want us to be more than friends? Huh? I get it. They have to tailor it in a way that it appeals to people who've never had romances with these characters before, so it's open to them. That's fair. But I really wish they'd taken the time to make it a bit different for people who'd already romanced these characters, make it feel a bit more like it flows on naturally, because it went too far in the other direction. It didn't feel real in some areas. It just kind of felt like, I know this is a hypothetical, but if I'd been in Shepard's situation, and I'd said to Liara after romancing her twice before, I'd like us to be more than friends, I'd expect Liara to turn at me, stare at me like I had two heads and said, what do you mean more than friends? We've literally hooked up at several points in the last few years. More than friends is a foregone conclusion. We already know this. So yeah, I just think a bit more of a variance for veteran romances with certain characters would have been a bit better, but that is a bit of a nitpick. I get why it wasn't. The only other comment I have is that playing as FemShep did limit my options a little bit. I really wanted to see the romances with Miranda and Jack, but they aren't into girls. Oh, also, one thing I have to add on that I haven't said until this point, the music in this game is phenomenal. I can't go on to the final bit of the video without talking about the music because it is just so good. It's this ethereal kind of like Star Wars style score that feels big budget. Things like the Normandy, Uncharted World stand out to me, and there are plenty of other ones like Suicide Mission that are great, but one in particular grabs me more than any other song, An End Once and For All. And so, speaking of which, let's talk about the ending of Mass Effect 3. This is going to sound dramatic, but I'd only been playing Mass Effect for 2 weeks, and yet this ending felt like I've been playing the games for years. That's how invested I felt at this final point of the game. Seeing everything come together in this final choice, after killing the Elusive Man, after watching Anderson die, after meeting the Catalyst on the roof of the Crucible and them giving us these options to destroy the Reapers, to control them, to synthesize them. I absolutely loved the choices it gave you, and I loved the ending. I played through all 4 possible options, the 4th one obviously being rejecting them, which isn't really an ending per se, but I still tried it anyway. But as I picked my first playthrough and as my favorite choice, just watching Shepard destroy the Reapers, get caught up in the explosion, and then watch Liara days later put the Shepard name tag on the Normandy Memorial, that broke me. That was the 4th cry, and it was... oh, it was bad. After building up that romance for 3 games and watching Shepard cart Liara off into the Normandy to save her life, it just completely broke me, and I absolutely loved everything about the ending. I do get the criticism that the choices you make before that don't really impact it, and you know, I heard that when the games originally were releasing, BioWare had hyped up that all your choices would play into the final choice. That's, you know, less forgivable, but for me, I didn't experience that. I just went into the games as is, and I really liked it. And I do get when people say they were sad that their choices during the 3 games didn't really impact the ending, but I I honestly just don't care. You know, to me, those choices impacted the rest of the game enough. They changed a lot of consequences and you saw a lot of things play out differently because of what you'd done and what you'd chosen and how you'd behaved. And at the end of the day, logically speaking, if Rex or Tally or Legion or Miranda or Jack were dead, would that really change the final choice? No, it wouldn't. You'd still be faced with this same choice. What do you do with the Reapers? How do you save the galaxy? Do you save the galaxy? And not to mention, your choices right through Mass Effect 3 do have an adverse effect on the ending. You might not even get all of the options of the final choice if you don't have enough military strength. And you don't even get the post-credit stinger of Shepard potentially surviving in the Destroy ending if you don't have the max military strength, which, for the record, I didn't either. I looked up the wrong guide and looked at a Mass Effect 3 guide rather than the Legendary Edition one, and the scoring system is different. The guide I looked at said I needed 4,000 military strength, and me at 6,900 went, cool, let's play. Turns out in the Legendary Edition you need 7,800, so I'm playing it again until I see Shepard is alive in that post-credit stinger. I don't care, I've already seen it on YouTube, I want to see it in my game. Just hearing that beautiful music play as Shepard gives her life potentially, I was crying my eyes out at 2 in the morning watching this game I'd fallen in love with for the last 2 weeks come to an end. Everything about it was absolutely fantastic, and I don't have a criticism for the ending. I wish I could be in the camp that everyone else seems to be in and saying that Mass Effect 3's ending is so bad, it's irredeemable, I can't forgive it, but I just can't be in that camp. I just can't. Sorry. Whew, okay. So that is everything about Mass Effect Legendary Edition. What's next for Mass Effect for me? Well, I've just started playing Andromeda again. I did actually play it when it first came out in April of 2017, I think it was. Didn't finish the game because it was my first foray into Mass Effect. I liked it, but didn't love it. Now I've played this original trilogy. I've got a newfound love for the franchise. I'm excited to hop back in from the start. Will it be as good as the trilogy? Definitely not. Will there be an underrated story in there? Hopefully. But as for the Mass Effect 4 that's been teased, I've only just now realised that's Liara in the cutscene, which has me very happy. And I'm hoping that just maybe the Shepard surviving little Easter egg at the end of Mass Effect 3 might get answered. I don't want Shepard to come back if the story doesn't need it, but if they can write a story good enough to bring Shepard back and give me my power couple again, I ain't gonna complain, believe me. And what was interesting was I've seen some comments on the new trailer suggesting that they've released the Legendary Edition now as a bit of a ploy to input saves over from that version of the game into the next one, so what you do carries over. How that would work with the final ending of Mass Effect 3, I don't know. Maybe they just canonized that bit and not the rest. But as a concept, I kind of want that to be true. That sounds great. But to conclude, Mass Effect has very quickly and very easily become one of my favourite franchises of all time and some of my favourite games of all time. I cannot genuinely believe I slept on these games for as long as I did. I genuinely can't. So if you're still watching this now after however long this video is, I'm going to check how long I've been recording for now. 40 minutes. But if you're still listening and you haven't yet played Mass Effect Legendary Edition, I'm sorry for the spoilers because there were a lot of them, but please pick it up and play it. It's a fantastic game and I honestly can't recommend it enough. It's so good. And as you can tell from my cap, from a poster behind me that I don't think you can see because of my chair, I'm all in. Absolutely fantastic game, and I'm so glad I made the purchase. But thank you all very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It shows me you like this content and would like to see more. It feels good to make a non-payday video, you know, talk about a different game I've been interested in, and maybe I'll do a few more of these going forward. So thank you all very much for watching. If you have enjoyed, like I said, make sure you drop a like. Subscribe if you're new to check out more content. It's quick, it's free. I'll always love you for doing so. And if you want to see more content from me that's just payday or non-payday, hop on over to my Twitch at twitch.tv/RedArcherLive, where I stream several times a week, playing a whole host of other games. Links to support me on Patreon and channel members are also in the description, as well as the Discord server if you're not already a member. But either way, thank you all very much for watching. I will see you all next time with a brand new video. Until then, look after yourselves, stay safe, and thanks for watching.